My name is William John Nicholas. I'm at the Mawita'mk housing that's in Wigoba. I was born in Pictou Landing. At 6 months old, I was taken away to children's services, and I was bounced around 12 months to 3 years old. I was in a foster home, which I loved. I took them as my family. I knew I was different. I was native and they were non-natives. And I knew that. I was only 3, but I knew. But I loved them as my mom and dad. I called them mom and dad. And then one day a family came and they just told me, you're going with these people. I didn't even know who they were. I just went with them. But I remember crying from New Glasgow all the way to the Quebec border. And all I wanted to do was be back with my foster home. And when I went into this family, they were mean. They were just mean people. They used to use corporal punishment, even on a 3-year-old to a 5-year-old. I was being whipped, being locked up in the basement. I wasn't allowed friends. I didn't have any friends. And I knew I was different, but I kept asking myself, why? Why am I going through this? What did I do? Why am I away from this family that I love so much? And I remember waking up at 6 in the morning, which I stayed until I was 18, or even 5, even earlier, and I wasn't allowed out of my bed. So I'd have to lay there for 2 or 3 hours, wide awake, and I'd be wondering every day, are they gonna come and get me today? Are they gonna... And that's what I wanted. I didn't want this, you're my dad, you're my mom, I love you, and I wasn't even allowed to call them mom and dad. I had to call them by their names. And I just really did not like it there. And then one day, when I was 6, a family rolled up, and I knew something was going on because I had been going back and forth to children's services, but they didn't tell me. And then I think a day before the next family came and got me, they were very nice, very loving family, but by then I was like, no, you're not my mom, you're not my dad. I'm not gonna... Mom has told me stories like when I was young, and the first day I was there, I guess I was going around to everybody and asking them, can I help you? Is there anything I can do for you? I'm only 5 years old. And I started telling my mom my stories, like from the other family, and we started writing, Bill's story. And that family denied it, denied everything. There was no corporal punishment, And later on in life, like I was 12, I went and visited them. And I asked my brothers, I don't know what to call them. They were my adopted brothers, but I was no longer their family. But I'd asked them, did mom and dad do this to us? And did they do that to us? And they're like, no, no, no. And then one of my brothers just kind of went, don't talk about it, And they treated me like royalty that weekend. Like whatever I wanted, they got it for me. I think back about it now, and it's like the guilt. Was that the guilt that they felt? And so when I was in my next family, I rebelled, and all I wanted was a foster home. No more I love you, no more dad, mom, I just want, no. And this was what, my 7th family. And then finally my parents couldn't deal with me anymore, and they put me in another foster home, which I stayed until I was 18. And not knowing what love was or what love was supposed to be. I was very closed, closed person. I'd let you in, but if I feel like I'm threatened, I'll just close back up. So like growing attached to people, it just, there was no, I didn't have the tools, I guess, at the time. And like some of my friends, they knew, like I growing up, all the pain that I had, I always looked for something to numb it. And I started drinking at a very young age. I started smoking marijuana at a very young age. And pretty well, you name it, I've done it. Except for maybe the newer designer drugs. But like when I was a teenager, I was bad. I'll just say it right out, I was no angel. But at the same time, I was, like, 'cause I did have good morals. But because I was Native, living in a non-Native community, I was like, you want to see bad, I'll show you bad. But at the same time, I knew my limits, and I knew, like I had certain things I don't believe in, and I never have, and I don't believe in them now, so I didn't do it, But like, there was never that attachment. I could never get attached to anybody. And when I had gone to my last foster home, I remember them bringing me to a reform school, and they put me under observation for 72 hours. And my adopted family, my last adopted family, were very, they're all intellectuals. Like they had degrees and, several. And they tried their best, to provide me a nice home and well bringing up. And I just rebelled and rebelled and rebelled. I couldn't deal with the hurt. So when I had gone to the reformer school, because I had finally had enough of, and after the weekend, the foster social worker came in, and I said, "Oh, here we go again," And first thing she says, she goes, "Well, you pack your bags, and we're gonna go. We have a group foster home for you." And I was like, finally, after all these years, that's what I wanted all this time. No more attachments, no more I love you, no more, mom and dad. And I went to this foster home, and I was never happy. I was never, like, for you to see a smile on my face, either I was high or I was drinking. Like, my friends knew, oh, he must be drinking. He's got a smile on his face. Oh, he's high because he's smiling. So I had a reputation of, and of course, being in a non-Native community, I was always the one to blame. Sometimes I wouldn't even be in the area, like not even 10 miles near the place, and they still right away, oh, it's that Indian, They used to call me Indian, and I've been called every name in the book, And it made me resent being a Native. It really, I hated it because I was always picked on. I was always, it's there goes the Indian. Like, people used to walk by me and just stare at me. And like, they'd see me every day, but they just like gawk at me. And I hated it. I just, and I always wanted to come back, where's my family? Why? And my adopted mom, she made sure I was registered at 6 years old. And they thought she was nuts. They said, why do you want to register him? Because he's a Native and he should be registered. And we had gotten all the papers from Indian Affairs, from Child Services, and I had read it, and the way I looked at it was my parents picked alcohol over me. They didn't want me. And that's what I grew up. What did I do? Why don't they want me anymore? And then the next family, and the next family. And I kept thinking it was me. I'm the one doing something wrong. I'm the one that's, and it was beyond my control, but I didn't know. I'm just a child. And I remember at points in my life, I didn't want to live. I didn't, but I kept saying to myself, I'm going to meet my family one day. One day I'm going to meet them. And so years had gone by, and when I turned 18, my children's services woke me up that morning. Happy birthday, come and have breakfast. Pack your bags, and where do you want to go? I had no money, I had no apartment, I had nowhere to go. And he just dumped me out on the street, told me good luck in life. And I said, yeah, see ya. And I went on my own, and my adopted dad wanted me to work, and he knew I had looked for work in probably a 100-mile radius of where we were living, and I just couldn't find a job. And he told me, oh, what about your friends in Ontario? Why don't you go see them? There's work there. So, okay. And he gave us $40 to hitchhike from Magog, Quebec to St. Catharines, Ontario. Well, the next day, I got hit by a truck hitchhiking. I ended up in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and my dad felt so guilty. He came and got me, and I had nowhere to stay still, but I was injured. And I went and stayed with him, and I did book reports to pay for my rent. So he wanted me to, continue with my knowledge. And when I was going to school, I took the easy route out. I took an auto-body course, and I got my diploma. So that was like, I don't have to go to school anymore. I'll go do auto body, And I did do auto body for a lot of years, for about, I'd say about 15 years altogether. I'd work for a couple months and go somewhere else and work for a couple months. And by the time I was 24, I'd gone across Canada like 7 times. And I even wrote a book. I even wrote it's like a poem, I guess. And it's called Searching. And it's me looking for something. And in the meanwhile, I didn't have any children until I was 27. And that's when I realized what love was, when I seen my son born. I said, this is what love really is. This is what it really feels like. Because all those years, that's all I searched for. And like all the drinking and the drug abuse, it has caught up to me. And like one thing that I think that, like I have diabetes too. I have a lot of health problems right now. And I became a diabetic when I was 21. And what caused it was from all the different families I went to all different diets. And one family I lived in, all we ate was natural food, no preservatives, no sugar, nothing. And I ate like that for 7 years. And then the next thing I know, I'm back out on my own, eating junk food, eating, takeout all the time. And, I knew how to cook, but I just too lazy. I just go buy it, I'll go to a restaurant instead, And I became diabetic. But in the meantime, I was still doing drugs, still drinking. And my doctors would tell me, you gotta stop, you can't be doing this, And I'm 21 years old. Like, who the hell are you to tell me to stop, When I want to stop, I'll stop. And I struggled for years with my diabetes, with my drinking, and my sugars were up and down all the time. Like they were never, I'd never tell me, you're gonna regret this later on. And I'm like, yeah, or whatever, And then my kids were born, and I kind of like smartened up, like I got into opiate abuse, and that was the biggest struggle I had, was kicking that habit. I worked really hard to kick that habit. I went on the methadone program for 3 years. I hitchhiked New Glasgow, Dartmouth for like a month and a half in the middle of the winter, every day just to go get my methadone. And when I came back to the reserve in Pictou, I found out my friend was seeing somebody else. The mother of my children was seeing somebody else. She had given up on me because she had told me, I don't know how many times I told her, I'm gonna quit. I'm going for help. And she kept, yeah, right, you've been saying that for this. And finally I just said, okay, I'm not gonna talk to anybody, I'm just gonna do it. And when I come back, I'll be healthy. So when I came back to New Glasgow, I phoned her, and I had found out that my dad was dying that day. My adopted dad. He didn't want to come and see me. He didn't want me to see him. He told me, like, literally, he goes, if you come, I'm phoning the police on you. I don't want you to see me. And I was like, I didn't know why. And then I phoned my ex. I found out she's seeing somebody. No, she asked me to come and see her. And I hitchhiked all the way up here. And she didn't believe that I was sober. Like, she didn't believe I was clean. And I looked at her neck. I said, what's on your neck? And she goes, are you seeing somebody else? And she goes, yeah. And I lost it. And I said, I did all this work for what? But at the same time, I thought, well, hey, I'm clean, So I went home, and I was devastated. I got news from my dad, and then I get news from her. And I had gone downstairs, I put a rope around my neck. I was standing on the chair, and I was crying and crying and crying. And I was just about to step off the chair, and I pictured my son and my daughter, them crying. And I said, oh my God, I can't do this to them. I grew up without my parents. I would do anything just to have one day with my parents. I would do anything for them. And I cut the rope down, and I got off the chair, and I said, I'm going to continue. I can do this. So then, in the meantime, I was still going back and forth getting my methadone. And she didn't believe me. Like, she didn't believe that I was actually clean, I wasn't shoving a needle in my arm anymore. And after she seen that I was clean, she wanted me back. She goes, he's the father of my children, and, he's a good man, and, And so I moved back. And meanwhile, Pictou Landing was getting upset with me. You have a place here, and you're staying there, make up your mind. And I told them, I said, well, if she kicks me out, where am I going to go? I'll be back at square one, no place. And one of them understood. The other ones, no. They kept pressuring me and pressuring me, and finally I just gave it up. I said, "Here, take it." And I moved back up here, and then I had to hitchhike. I hitchhiked for a year and a half, 2 times a week, by Coggabotton to Glasgow to get my methadone to stay clean. And one day I got down on my knees and I didn't know what to do, and then I asked, what do I do? You know, because I never, growing up, I did have faith, but at the same time I was like, well, if you're such a loving God, why, you know? So, but I would pray every once in a while, and I was brought up going to church every week, every weekend, and next thing you know, I'm getting kicked out. And I remember hitchhiking back home, and I'm thinking, this is your answer? Me getting kicked out? And I was so mad, like I was really mad. And I had to walk across the causeway. And on the other side of the causeway, I became calm, like not a worry in the world. I'm getting off this methadone. So that day there, and everything lined up. It all lined up perfectly, because that day, I remember to go get my methadone, they told me, they want to talk to you. You've had another strike. So I said, okay. So I phoned them up, and we'd like to talk to you. I said, well, I'd like to talk to you too, because I want off this stuff. I don't want to take it anymore. I said, at the rate I'm going, it's going to take 10 months. I said, I want to be off this in days. Not weeks, not months, days. And they're like, oh no, we can't do that. I said, well, yes you can. You know, this is my body, and this is what I want. So the doctor talked me into taking 2 milligrams a day for 21 days. He's going to decrease me by 2 milligrams. And 21 days later, I was off the methadone, and I was like, hey, I'm free again. I can do whatever I want, you know. I don't have to live around, you know. But I stayed sober. I stayed off the needle, and I stayed clean. And that was 16 years ago. But that, like, when I was growing up, I had looked for drugs and alcohol, something to numb the pain. And when I got to the opiates, that was it. That was the number one pain. Not just the physical pain, but your emotional pain. But the thing with opiates is, when you withdraw from it, you feel so horrible. It's like a really nasty flu you have, like the worst flu in the world. And all you need to do is take one fix, and you're up and good to go. You wouldn't even know it. You know, and that's why I understand why so many people have problems with addiction, with opiates, because, and like, when you're using that type of drug, you're not just your pain receptor, your emotional receptors close. Like, your best friend could die beside you, and you'd probably go through his pockets first before you phone 911. You know, and it wouldn't even faze you probably until, like the way I've always explained it, when you're coming off the opiates, is, let's say this is your pain receptors at a normal rate, and they're taking in the pain. So when you take opiates, it closes them. But meanwhile, all this information, all this pain and everything is still trying to get in, but it's not. But it's still there. And then when you come off the opiates, instead of opening back up like that, it kind of goes like an amplifier. And it just, I think that's one of the reasons why there's a continual abuse of opiates, and there's suicide. Because when I first cleaned up and I stopped, the emotions that came back were unbelievable. Like, I cried and cried and cried, and, you know, one of the workers actually got me through it. because like I was, screw this, I'm going back, I'm gonna go get this out of my system. But at the same time, it's like, no, it's time for me, I gotta deal with this. And like, I'm glad, like, I've seen the worst in people and I've seen the best in people. And I'm just glad that a lot of times I didn't get sucked down that path of, you know, like I was in the self-destruction, but I kind of knew my limits. I kind of knew like, hey, I'm pushing this envelope a little bit too far. You know, and thank God I could be a lot more sick than I am. I actually did finally meet my family when I was 21. My biological sister had gone into child find, and my adopted sister, she worked for the Montreal Gazette, and she thought it was important to tell my story. So she went into child find, and the lady, for some reason, remembered the name. The lady remembered seeing my name, I guess, and she told him his biological sister was just in here like a couple weeks ago. And in the meantime, I remember looking in phone books in New Glasgow, and I always knew my last name, my real last name. But the Children's Services had crossed it out, but my mom had seen it. And if you put it up in the light, you could see through the black marker, the name. And I would phone to Glasgow every once in a while. You know, I'd see the name Nicholas, and I'd phone up, and no answer. No answer, no answer. So I kind of like, oh, whatever, you know. So then one day I get a phone call from my sister, and she goes, guess what? I said, what? And she goes, I found your family. Okay. Would you like to go visit them? Sure, why not? You know, can't do it, you know. Yeah, all right. And I was kind of like nervous, but at the same time, kind of like, why now? Like, why, you know, they didn't want me. Like, that's the way I was brought up. I always thought I was brought up, I wasn't wanted. And I always thought my other families, I wasn't wanted. And when I got to my last family, well, my second last family, my adopted family, I just said, you're not gonna want me, you know. And they really tried their best. And so that July, this is in January, and in July, like I didn't believe it, you know, I kind of like, whatever, yeah. You know, I you know, kind of curious, but at the same time kind of afraid, and you know. So we made a week trip out of it, and she came down, and she did an article on me meeting my family, and I met all my sisters, except for one. She was out west, and I had a brother that passed away, and so I met them, and I remember seeing them the first time, and I said, you got the right family? Because they didn't look anything like me. And I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, well, I'm sure. Okay. And that's when I heard the truth, what happened. You know, I have 6 sisters, a brother, 3 half-brothers. And at the time, I think when I was living with my biological family, there was only 5 sisters and a brother. And when Children's Aid came, they took us all. They had tricked us with ice cream. but I was just a baby. And my sister that day, she had an exam to do at school, my oldest sister, so she couldn't come and watch me. So the next oldest was watching me. And Children's Aid had came a few times. Like even my own family members phoned Children's Services on my family, and I don't know why to this day. Like I never asked them, you know. And but my parents, from what I heard, they were self-sufficient. They didn't like relying on ration. They made their own, you know. They had a lot of pride, and you know they made their own money. And back then, my mom and my dad, when Children's Aid picked us up, they were going to buy $150 worth of groceries. This is 1969. That's a lot of food, you know. And someone had phoned Children's Aid and told them that my parents were all on a drunk again. So Children's Aid came, they stopped the bus, they got my other sisters off the bus, and they came to the house, and they had my sister and myself, and they tricked them, and let's go get some ice cream. Well, a couple hours later, they brought them back, except for me. And my mom just lost it. She totally went nuts. And she I guess, threw out all the groceries, and, you know, and I guess the drinking progressed a lot after that. And she passed away when she was 49. And one of the last things she said to my sister was, find baby William. Promised me to find baby William. So they looked for me and looked for me and looked for me. And in the meantime, I didn't know. I always thought I wasn't wanted, you know. And then I even, at one point, I used to think, well, you guys picked alcohol over me, you know. I'm not important. Alcohol's more important. I didn't know about addiction. I didn't know about, you know, alcoholism, and, you know. So I was getting all these answers. Like, hey, I'm finding out the truth here. You know, and I always say, why? Why did they do this to me? You know, what was, you know? And I was part of the 60s and 70s Scoop. You know, little Native boys were in demand. And I always thought I was alone going through that growing up. And just recently I read some articles and papers about other people that have gone through, you know, that were taken away for no reason. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like my life right there. You know, that's me. You know, and I remember thinking even 20 years ago, I want to sue them. You know, I went through all those families. You know, at 18, they kicked me out in the street and tell me good luck in life. You know, no tools, no nothing. You know, and I had a lot of resentment towards that for a lot of years. Oh man, I was angrier than ever because I didn't know why. But I never gone to counseling. You know, I never, you know, people tell me, you gotta go for counseling, you know. You gotta do this, you gotta do that. And I'm like, oh, whatever, you know. I'm only in my 20s, I don't need that, you know. And it wasn't until I was like 37 that I was actually proud of being a Native American. I was like, I learned more about, because growing up, all I heard was the so-called, you know. Like even I remember one family, they told me, we're going to turn you into a good Indian. You know, and I looked at them like, what are you talking about? You know, I didn't, you know, to me, we're all people, you know. But I knew I was Native, you know, I knew because like I used to run around going, ooh, you know. And so I was so, like I was really, really mad because I said, why did I have to be born in a native? And why did I have to go through all this? And today I still ask that question sometimes. And when I was 21, I wanted to sue. Like and I had gone and seen a lawyer, and the lawyer told me, well, no, because you can't. You'd have to do a class action suit. And so I kind of, okay, whatever, But I still feel like I should be compensated for all this, what I've gone through. And later on I found out there is lawsuits, but that's going on mostly out west in Ontario, and there's nothing really happening in Nova Scotia. And it's not the money. I don't care about the money. I want an apology. I want someone to say, yeah, we did wrong, and we're sorry. But that's never going to take back all those years, that I didn't be with my... Like, I'm an apple. I'm red on the outside, I'm white on the inside. And, like, even when I came back to the reserve, I was very judgmental. Like, I'm better than you, I gotta, I lived with white people, and I had that mentality, and it took me years to get over that. They're like, hey, we're just all human beings, and we got to deal with the cards we're dealt, and try our best. And I just, like, I was always a hard worker, very hard worker. To me, doing hard labor was nothing, and I would work for peanuts at times because they took advantage of me, because they knew I was desperate for work. And minimum wage was like, I think, $8-9 an hour back then. I was getting paid $6 under the table, and the guy knew he's not going to find work anywhere else. He knows I'm desperate. So, and I've been paid, made $20 an hour, So, like, money for me has never been a real... As long as I'm comfortable, I'm happy, And... But I always kind of wondered, what if, what if I did, if I didn't go through this? What if I didn't go through that? And I blame my diabetes on that one diet, going from 7 years of no preservatives, no sugars, to eating everything and anything. And my diabetes didn't really bother me until 5 years ago. My kidneys, I had gone to see the doctor, and I remember I was picking up cinder blocks, and I used to pick them up one hand and whip them, and there I was using two hands trying to pick them up. I could barely pick them up, and I checked my sugars and they were normal, but I knew something wasn't right. Something in my body wasn't clicking, and I was back in Waikagama, and I was throwing up for 6 hours straight. I threw up. That's all I did. I drink water, throw it up. Drink water, throw it up. Drink water, throw it up. And if I didn't throw up, I had dry heaves. And my friend had said, something's wrong. You got to go to the hospital. No, I'll get over it. It's not feeling well. No, you got to go. It's not normal to be throwing up that long, and So I had gone. I went to the doctors, and they took blood work, and I'm fearing the worst because of my drug abuse. I'm scared they're going to tell me I got Hep, or I have HIV or something like that. And I thank my Creator, I'm clean. I didn't get Hep or HIV, even from all that drug abuse. But I was watching her write, and I'm looking at her, and she's writing renal failure, and I'm like, are you saying to me my kidneys are failing? Is that what you're writing down? She goes, yeah. She goes, you're a very sick man. I'm like, okay. And I knew a little bit about renal failure, you know, dialysis. Okay. So I think it was like 5 months later, I finally started dialysis. And and at the time I was like, I know I have the right to stop dialysis anytime I want to. But I know if I stop, I'm gonna die. And many times I've asked myself, is this worth it? This fight, is it worth it? And when I first started dialysis, I was walking, driving my car, going, I'd go do everything. But I hated being on that machine. That machine, just 4 hours of anxiety. Like, my anxiety levels are really bad. And I don't know if it's post-traumatic stress syndrome from being a child and going through all what I went through, but I can get very stressed out at times. And one day coming back from dialysis, I fell. First time in 22 years that I went to hypoglycemic. I passed out from that. And I broke a little bone in my ankle on this. So the next day I went to see the doctors, and they did an x-ray, and all they came back with is with a painkiller. Told me there's nothing broken. So I came home, and my knees all swollen. Both knees are swollen. My ankles are swollen. And I figured, it'll go away. And a month later, I started getting redness on the bottom of my foot. I went to go see, my doctor wasn't in, so another doctor. Oh, he's got an infection. Put him on IV for 5 days. So I was going back for 5 days, and the redness had gone away, and within one night, the redness all came back. So I went to go see my doctor. He was back on that Friday. And he looks at my foot. Go for an x-ray right now. Not tomorrow, not Monday, now. And you come back. All right. So I went to the hospital, got an x-ray, went back. Well, William, you're going to lose your foot. Okay. He goes, you go tomorrow to Sydney. You see a specialist. I'm phoning him in. He's going to come in just to see you. You make sure you make it there. Yeah. Next day I went in, he looked at the x-ray, he came, he said, I'm sorry, you're going to lose your foot. You know what I told him? I'll do her up. And he looked at me and he's like, what? I said, do her up. And he goes, you're taking this very well. I said, what do you want me to do? No use crying over it. I said, I can't do anything about it. And so the next day, they cut it off, and it didn't dawn on me until like a week later. I was at my house. Well, not a week later. Well, a week later after I got home from the hospital. And so this had been like 4 weeks since I had gotten cut off. And my wheelchair was like 10 feet from me. I couldn't get it. And that's when it hit me. Oh my God, like, I lost a foot here, And in the meantime, I was waiting to get into rehab for get a prosthesis, and that I can no longer, I could barely even walk. And then like 3 years ago, I had fell and I broke this elbow. And they told me, we can't do anything because of my fistula. So, okay. It healed. It didn't heal properly. I couldn't straighten it. There's some things I couldn't do with it. And then March of last year, I broke it again. but this time I broke the bone. It's broken right straight across. And same thing. We can't do anything. Your fistula's there. And I'm like, screw the fistula, you know. Put a line in me, you know. Get rid of the fistula, fix my arm. And they wouldn't do it. And then this year, they tried operating on it. And it worked for the first week. And then after that, the screws and the pins all came back out. So now my elbow's all, and I'm waiting for another surgery. Meanwhile, they ended up putting a fistula there after, 3 years of waiting. And then they realized they can't use that arm because I can't have both arms tied down while I'm at dialysis. It's bad enough I'm tied down, but I can't use this arm to eat or do anything. And I can't bend this arm because the needles will puncture the vein. Now they decided they're going to put a line in here. Like, you guys could have done that years ago, you know. And I was like, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out, come on, you know. But I'm going to finally get it. And that's why I'm in this wheelchair, is because I can't walk. And when I do walk, I end up, and he told me if I fall on this elbow now, I'm pretty well screwed. Like, you'll be lucky if you make it to the hospital, because the screw, I'll probably bleed to death. So this is my little safety net here. But this is all a combination of my drug abuse, not taking care of my diabetes, you know. And I see people in the community. I hear people too, like, our diabetes rate is outrageous. And then I know people that their sugars are in their 20s. And they're, you know, and I keep telling them, you know, you gotta take care of yourself. Yeah. No, really. I said, you gotta take care of yourself. He goes, this is the end result. What do you mean? I said, my kidneys failed because of my sugars. I said, I lost my leg because of my diabetes. I said, my bones don't heal, you know, and now I'm finding out this happened and this is happening. And, you know, and it's like, I think of, why didn't I listen? You know, I remember some people telling me, hey, you shouldn't be doing drugs, you shouldn't be drinking, you know, you're diabetic, and you shouldn't be eating that, and, you know. Then I'd be like, yeah, whatever, buddy. This ain't gonna happen to me. And, you know, it happens, you know. And that's one of my, I've always wondered why was I put on this earth? Why did I have to go through everything I went through? And this is only a little glimpse of what I've been through. Like, it's, for someone my age, I've seen a lot more than the average bear. You know, like, I've seen both sides of the coin. I've lived with rich people and been with rich people and money like crazy, and I've been homeless and nowhere to go and walking down the streets, nothing to eat, you know. So, you know, I'm not a materialistic person. I never have been, and I don't think I ever will be. It just doesn't interest me. You know, like, I used to make $1,000 a week. I used to make $1,000 a day. You know, and I lived on welfare, like, you know, peanuts, you know, to make it through the month. But what I can say is I got my faculties. I got my, like, the physical, I can deal with the physical. Like, I'm in constant pain, 24/7. You know, and the worst part about it is I do take opiates for the pain, and they don't help. But I have to take something but there's always that little, devil on your shoulder. And every once in a while I gotta, hey, leave me alone, because I'm not going back to the way I was. I can only live for today and, and look for a brighter future. And it's not all doom and gloom. A lot of people tell me, geez, you're strong, Bill, you've been through so much. And what keeps you smiling? What keeps you from, and there's no use. What's the use of being mad? What's the use of being sad? I may as well just enjoy today, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow might not even come, so. Yeah.